It is a major find. It is nothing like I've ever seen in boat building. It is the earliest Australian-built colonial vessel ever excavated in Australia, so 1820s. It's the only one which has been raised intact.
This boat doesn't look like it was built in a very formal shipyard. It looked like it was done maybe by a couple of guys by the side of the river. And that tells us so much about what its role was. And by looking at that, we can see maybe what these people were involved with.
Where we are at the moment is at the stern of the vessel, or the back end of the vessel. The timber that you can see closest to you is the stern post, the back end of where the rudder would have been attached on the vessel. And here you're seeing all the frames that made up the hull. Some of these timbers have been really roughly cut.
It's hugely exciting, and it's built out of Australian woods, so we're seeing the early shipbuilding traditions here in Australia.
This would have been a small coastal trader. It would have worked around Sydney, probably gone up to Hawkesbury, maybe down to Shoalhaven. But these vessels get wrecked very easily, and the reason we've got this vessel is because it was dragged ashore near a boatyard and just left to decay until it got buried. So it's a very rare find.
When the boat was found, there's a huge discussion about, do we lift it intact? Do we remove it and dispose of it? Or do we lift it and then pull it apart and then conserve it? So the decision then was taken to actually lift it in pieces and then conserve it in pieces.
We've recorded every timber in position. We put a new tag on it that will stay with it its whole conservation life. So once we've tagged it and recorded it, we pull it up and we put it on a board and take it over to be processed. The biggest danger to the wreck in terms of its being reassembled is if they dry out and they start warping. So keeping them wet and then in the refrigerator means that they stay wet longer until such time as we get them into a tank full of water and start treating them.
We've got these big containers here, they're refrigerated, and everything has been wrapped up in like a wet fabric, which has then been put in plastic, so it's kept it wet for about a year now. What we're then doing is we're taking it out, photographing the pieces of wood. We're putting them in the tank when they're waiting to be cleaned because it needs to be kept wet. It came out of a wet condition. If it dries out, it's going to crumble. So then we take it out of the tank and we go to the next cleaning phase.
We clean all the silt off, and then the conservators will look at it and make a decision about what sort of treatment should be applied. Before the treatment takes place though, we do go over to the recording area where we scan it and produce a 3D model so that we can capture its shape just as it came out.
Eventually we will have a 3D scan of every timber on the wreck, so we can use that data to kind of reconstruct the vessel digitally. We also have it for documentation purposes, so we'll be using these scans to look at where the nails are, the treadles are, and that will tell us about the construction sequence of the ship, which tools were used, how many builders were on the project. It kind of gives us a deep dive into the archaeological record.
Come on in, please, Kieran.
Great, thanks, Jane.
Let me show the artefacts associated with the boat.
This. There's thousands of artefacts found. So we have underneath the vessel we found material, on top of the vessel we found material, and underneath the ceiling planks, the inner linings of the vessel, we found material.
This one was found sitting in the boat.
I'm intrigued. Is it a whale
This is
tooth?
a sperm whale tooth.
Sperm whale tooth.
Yes.
We can use this information to actually help date the vessel. When it first got pulled up onto the bank, when the vessel was in use, and hopefully what happened to the vessel afterwards.
It's really important to do this kind of work. The boat is so unique that we are learning things from it every day. It's opened our eyes to the boat building technology that we didn't know. We're rethinking everything.
Throw out the rule book when it comes to boat building with the Barangaroo boat. It is a totally unique craft. This is the very first time the conservators have tried conserving a boat of this age in Australia built out of Australian timbers. So we're learning a lot about the science of wood technology, all from this project.
The chemical phase that we're going through right now is to remove the iron. That causes problems in the short term and the long term conservation of this boat.
The reason why you want to get that iron out is that it proves a problem when you use polyethylene glycol, which is a sort of soluble wax. The iron reacts with the polyethylene glycol, and unless the iron's removed, you can have a problem with sulphur, and that turns into sulphuric acid and the boat degrades.
The timbers are waterlogged. So what is actually keeping these cells in their shape is water. We need to replace that water with something else, and that's where the polyethylene glycol wax comes in.
Oh, we need to pull that in.
These timbers will sit in the polyethylene glycol and they will slowly start taking up, we call it peg wax. And then eventually, when it is time to take them out, there will be minimal changing of the wood because instead of water bulking it out, it's now polyethylene glycol wax.
The next stage is freeze drying. After that, it's a case of getting it out of the freeze dryers and then reassembling it, hopefully at the Australian National Maritime Museum.
The dream is that members of the public could come in and see the boat being put back together piece by piece, which in itself is very exciting to see this little bit of history coming together before their eyes.